Hi everyone. Today we're going through some true stories shared by people on Reddit. These are real experiences from real users. So let's get into it. When I was 13, I spent a summer with my grandfather and my step-grandmother, a wonderful woman who I love very much. This is her preferred term of address for me, at their old house in London. My parents were wrapped up in sorting out some matters with my siblings, and I loved my grandparents, so I was excited for a comparatively independent summer. The house is a fairly normal terraced house that my step-grandmother has owned since the late 1960s. But since I'd grown up overseas in a much more modern city, it felt old and creepy to me at times, especially at night. I would get pretty skittish when I heard creaking around the house or if the pipes groaned, but I tried to ignore it. However, the one matter I could never get over was that I got a horrible feeling whenever I took a bath in the middle floor bathroom. More than once, I would be relaxing in the bath when I'd suddenly be gripped by a strange mixture of fear and lethargy. It would weigh down my body, and I'd feel unable to move for around a minute or so, followed by a jolt of adrenaline that would make me quickly get out of the bath. It wasn't frightening enough that I felt the need to tell anyone. I thought that if I started whining about the bathroom being scary, it'd worry my grandparents or get me sent home. I convinced myself that I was overly sheltered and childish about the old house. I just started using the upstairs shower room instead. About halfway through my stay, I'd discovered that if I wanted something from my grandfather, I needed to wait until my step-grandmother had gone to bed, and he'd poured his third glass of wine. For a man who lived to his late 90s, he was an impressively functional alcoholic. After that, if I wanted to ask him for an extra bit of cake for dessert or tag along with him to his shop the next day, he was much more likely to be in a great mood and say yes. I also quickly figured out that he was much more honest when he was drunk. My family kept a lot of things from the younger members, which frustrated me at the time. So even though I knew it was wrong, I used those evenings to pry into questions that I'd had for a long time. One matter that I'd always been curious about was my step-grandmother's first husband. He was spoken fondly of, but only rarely with a degree of secrecy that caught my overly nosy interest. At the time, I just thought they'd gotten divorced, similar to my grandfather and my grandmother. So one night, I raised the question to my grandfather and asked him what the man was like and if I'd ever meet him. My grandfather paused, looking a little sad, and said, "Oh, he was lovely. You would have gotten along great with him. But he's gone, sweetie. He ended himself years ago." I think I'd looked shocked, but for some reason my grandfather took this as a prompt for more information. He pointed straight at the bathroom. "In there, love." That was the end of it for the night. I felt incredibly guilty after that, and stopped asking my grandfather questions when he was drunk. As with most of our late-night conversations, my grandfather had no recollection of it in the morning, so I never brought it up. I spent the rest of the holiday on my best behavior and made a lot of lemon drizzle cakes for my step-grandmother, never telling her why. A year or so later, when my mom felt I was finally old enough to learn less pleasant things about the family, I got clarity on the details I'd suspected. My step-grandmother's first husband had ended his life in the bathtub. It had been bleached and cleaned, but for reasons probably tied to grief, they'd never remodeled it. I still don't know why I felt the way I did in the bathroom. I didn't know about my step-grandmother's first husband at the time. It had scared me out of using it. However, I trust my gut a great deal more now. I was about 10 or 11 when this happened. My mom and my brothers and I lived in a tribal housing house, Rabbit Ridge, located in Keshena, Wisconsin. They all went to my Grams for the evening and asked if I wanted to come with. I wanted to stay home, so I was by myself. I ended up hearing this tapping noise for like 5 minutes and couldn't figure where it was coming from. My mom had this drum set in the corner of our living room. I specifically remember watching American Dad and turned it down and determined it was coming from the drum set. I went and checked to see if maybe a mouse or something got stuck in one of the drums. I ended up seeing the top of one of drums ripple after I heard the tapping noise, but didn't see anything in the drum. I kind of got scared, but more intrigued. I saw and heard the drum hit again, so I hit myself a little harder, and the thing, whatever it was, hit it back just as hard. I did this like 5 more times, and it was responding. I wanted to continue to do this, but it deep down started to really freak me out. I did it 1 more time and got no response. I did it again and still no response. All of a sudden, from the back of my hallway, I heard something sprinting down the hallway right at me. All I thought to do was cover up and plug my ears. I then uncovered my ears and didn't see anything, but could feel something evil watching me. I remember sweating so bad I could feel what felt like each droplet on my head and back. I called my grandpa, panicked, and had him come and get me. Anyhow, some 20 years later, 6 months ago, my uncle called me and was really freaked out. He said he had this horrible dream where he was back at the old house in Rabbit Ridge at nighttime. He said he could hear his mom, my grandma, screaming from inside the house. He said he went in and my grandma went running out and said there was something in the back room. He said he went to go see what it was and went to the back room. He said the house was the same setup as when we were kids, when I was living there. He said he saw this man sitting on the bed looking back at him with an inhumanly big smile. Aaron, my uncle, asked him who he was, and he stated, "Don't you remember me?" Aaron said, "No, who are you?" He said, "I'm the man that was fucking with your nephew all them years ago on the drum set." Aaron said his heart dropped, and he got super freaked out, and the man jumped out the window. Now I don't know what to think, but I do believe those two things were connected. Aaron showed me a picture of what the guy/thing looked like. I want to post it on here somewhere. Find out super odd that 20 years had to pass and we have our own families now. This story/memory still sends chills down my spine. The next one is short, but really unsettling. When I was around 6 years old, I had went to stay with my grandmother, my dad's mom, who I never spent time with. But all of the sudden, she decided she wanted me to stay the weekend with her. Well, she told me to get in the car that was in the garage. She got in and started the car and said she would be right back, that she had to use the bathroom, and for me to not unbuckle or get out of the car. The garage door was closed, the car was started, and she had locked the door. Leading into the house, I watched her do it. I was in that car for so long, and the fumes from the car running started to be all I tasted/smelt. I started to dose off. I was dying, and all of the sudden, my father, who passed away when I was 2 years old in the coal mines, appeared and shook me. He said, "No, don't go to sleep, stay awake." So I rose back up into the seat, and there came my grandmother. The look on her face of just pure disgust was unreal. She was yelling and slamming the car door when she got in, so disappointed that I was not dead. She took me back home, and I never went to stay with her again. She had been married 8 times, and 4 of them magically got sick and died as well. That woman was a damn serial killer. Just can't prove it. She has since passed. In September 2021, my partner and I hiked a trail in Mount Rainier. I can't remember the exact name off the top of my head, but we'll update as soon as I figure that out. I remember it was a relatively short hike to a lake or two. There was a group of campers at one of the lakes, but we didn't see too many people on the actual trail. I just have to know if anyone had a similar experience. About 1.5 hours or so into the hike, I remember seeing movement in the woods in my periphery. When I turned to look, I made eye contact with a male wearing glasses who was peeking out from behind the tree, as in he was hiding behind the tree and creepily peeking just his head out. I was a bit ahead of my partner and quite literally froze in my tracks and shouted out my partner's name immediately while maintaining eye contact. This person ducked back behind the tree, and I'm going to assume ran into the woods. Even though I didn't hear anything, as my partner caught up to me. It was then my partner decided to inform me that he had seen something similar. A glasses-wearing man in the woods staring at me from behind trees, about an hour back. Obviously, I was confused that he didn't tell me about it, and he still let me go so far ahead. But he claimed he didn't want to freak me out and had thought the man was gone or was just a camper or hiker who went off trail for some innocent reason and just happened to be staring at me. It wasn't until I saw the unknown male that he realized the man must have been stalking me through the woods, clearly hiding out of my line of sight for some reason. We are avid national park goers, and I have never in 48 parks had an experience like this before or after. After thinking about this for almost 5 years now, and hearing so many strange stories about Mount Rainier, I just absolutely need to know if anyone has experienced something similar. Creeped me out to the bones when I made eye contact with the unknown male because he so clearly ducked behind the tree, like he was caught doing something bad. Still gives me an unsettling feeling when I think about what could have happened if I would have hiked alone. Maybe it's dramatic, but I just feel like this behavior was not normal and likely was not based on good intentions. I had no music on, wasn't talking much, and was just admiring the scenery as I hiked. So I have no idea how neither I or my partner didn't at least hear this man before I finally saw him. Especially since he was likely following me for at least an hour while only slightly off trail. I've never shared this before publicly, but I need to, because even as an adult, I still carry fear. Not of all white people, but especially ones who act like a man I knew as a child. My godfather, Lee. I was born in Georgia. My mother was 16, my father 36. Legal, but not right. She left him when I was 1 because he was abusive. He never hit me, but he was emotionally cold and dishonest. He never told me he loved me, but he did love telling stories. One story he repeated often was how he met my godfather, Lee, at a gas station in the early 1980s. Lee, a white man, called him a racial slur. Later that night, my dad saved him from being robbed at gunpoint. From that moment on, Lee said my dad was different and became his friend. Eventually, business partner. My dad even asked Lee to be my godfather. When I was 12, I finally got to visit my dad for the summer. One night, Lee offered me cash to clean his basement. I said yes, but the moment I walked down there, I knew something was wrong. My skin prickled. The air felt thick. At the bottom of the stairs was a mannequin in full KKK robes. The walls were covered in Confederate flags, nooses, lynching memorabilia, and white power signs. I froze. Lee appeared out of nowhere and said, smiling, "That room's off limits. Don't tell your daddy. He knows. But it don't need to be remembered." I left immediately. Told my dad I was sick and wanted to go home early. He didn't ask questions, just drove me back. Years later, I brought it up. My dad just said, sometimes a man's got ghosts. As long as they don't haunt you, you let them be. But they do haunt me. I still get nervous around certain white men, the ones who smile too fast, who say things like, "You're not like the others," who carry themselves the way Lee did, fake calm, polite, but full of something darker. And I'll be honest, this experience damaged my trust in men overall, including black men, because my own father handed me to a man he knew kept hate in his basement, then told me to be quiet about it. I don't hate all white people, and I don't hate all men, but fear. It learned its shape early, and it hasn't left me. It has affected my everyday life and how I view white people in general. How do I reverse this? I'm 36 and terrified of white people. I can't get those images out my head. I've been in law enforcement for over 16 years here in Texas, and have seen more than my fair share of tragic, creepy, and downright unexplainable things on the job. From murder scenes, to suicides, to fatality accidents. Sometimes, a place just feels different. I've posted here before about a burglary, in progress call I responded to. But here's another encounter that still sticks with me. I may have shared it before, but I figure it's worth repeating for everyone. There was one call I went to, a death notification, that really freaked me out. I had to contact some family members of deceased woman that was involved in a fatal car accident a few miles away from her home. When I arrived, I met a woman near the roadway, just inside the property gate. She said she heard me coming from miles away. I asked her if she lived at the residence, which she confirmed she did. After asking her to speak with me at the house, she agreed, but said she needed the walk, as the house was about 75 yards from the road. After making it to the house, I approached the front door on a small wooden porch and began scanning the driveway for the woman. It was about 1 a.m. and completely dark. While looking for the woman, the front door opened and a younger woman appeared. She was concerned about my presence and asked if everything was okay. I asked if I could speak with her and any other adults inside, and she welcomed me in. I told her I would wait for the woman I met near the gate, and she told me nobody else should be home. I then freaked out and began searching the property. Nothing. After entering the residence, I told her and her husband the news about Susan, which ended up being her mother. She said her mother moved in a few months back after her father had passed and wasn't handling it well. While she and her husband were comforting one another, I began looking at photos on the wall. There was this picture of a mid-aged woman that stuck out to me. She was a younger version of the woman I spoke with near the gate. While looking at the picture, the daughter confirmed that was her mother, the woman that passed in the wreck. I spoke with the ghost of the individual that died in the crash just before telling her family what happened. In around 2018/2019, I, 25, at the time was 18/19, was living in Nebraska, where I grew up. I lived in the largest city in Nebraska, but it was still essentially surrounded by corn and wheat fields. The city was expanding, so rich folks started building huge houses with giant properties on the edge of town as things proceeded to grow. All of that being said, I had a good friend whose parents' house was one of those big ones, right on the blurring line between the fields and the city. My friends and I were constantly hanging out at his place because it was fun. They had tons of property to ride 4x4s on, a hot tub, a huge living room for us to watch sports and have reality TV binge sessions, etc. Plus, his parents were super cool, and we could drink out there as long as we stayed at the house. It was tons of fun, even though I was /am quite scared of the dark. So I would just not go outside after a certain time because There was little lighting, and the nearest neighbor was about a mile away. I always felt a weird energy, driving to Slash from his place if it was late at night, but never had anything happened until one night. The drive out there was a long, winding two-way road that had thick trees on both sides, and you pass one of the city's largest cemeteries on the way. Barely any lighting, of course, besides the street lamps every once in a while, and very little traffic. It's all inherently a bit creepy, and I'll admit to having sped through this section of road many times to get through it as quickly as possible. This specific night was perfect spring weather, so I was driving with my windows down, listening to music. And it was around 10 p.m. I was coming around one of the curves in the road when I had to essentially slam my brakes on. Right in front of me, in the middle of the road, maybe 50 yards away, was what looked like a family. Again, picture a completely pitch-black road with thick forest on both sides and only my headlights to show what's in front of me. This was a family of 4. A tall, slim woman, an average height/weight man, a child, short hair, but couldn't tell the gender based on the clothing and couldn't see their face. Maybe around 8 years old, and the mother was pushing a fucking stroller. Their clothes looked normal, not tattered, but not nice. They also were not carrying any kind of light source, meaning before I arrived behind them in my car, they had been walking in the pitch black. They were all facing away from me, walking completely silent in the middle of the street the same direction I was heading. I had turned my music down to hear if they were speaking, had music playing, etc. They didn't. The hairs on my arms immediately stood up. I came to a stop in the road behind them, obviously, and just sat there for a moment to let them move. They seemed to be completely unaffected by me and didn't even turn their heads slightly, nor did they attempt to move out of my way. I literally thought I was going insane or that I was dreaming. It was so surreal. Before I really had time to fully process and register what I was seeing and how truly strange it was, they all, at the same time, stopped walking and very slowly turned to face my car. This scared the absolute shit out of me. I honestly didn't even give myself enough time to look at their faces as they turned. I immediately threw my car in reverse and sent it backwards for probably a full 20 seconds before flipping a U-turn, nearly running myself off the road and booking it the other direction. The only thing I remember noticing is that the stroller looked to be completely empty. This was the part that sticks in my mind the most. I've never felt terror like that in my life. I checked my rearview mirror probably 1,000 times before getting to a main road and never saw a glimpse of them. In fact, I never saw a glimpse of them ever again. I tried asking my friend and his family about it, only to essentially feel like I was insane because of the way they looked at me. Every time I tell this story, I get one of 3 reactions. They immediately think I'm fucking cuckoo, think I'm lying, or have had something sort of similar happen to them. I really don't care if no one believes me, honestly. It was, and still is, the creepiest thing to ever happen to me. I think about it all the time. It was either some weird-ass family trying to scare the shit out of someone, a distraction for an attempted robbery/assault/ etc., or it was something more sinister. I'm going to tell myself for probably the rest of my life that it was the first option. The following is a story that took place quite a few years back now. However, it still baffles me completely, and I'd like to share it here. I'm a teenager, and I've been in scouting/Boy Scouts for nearly all my life, and I really enjoy exploring with my friends and being trusted more, as I'm older now. A few years ago, me and 2 girls named Amy and Harriet were asked to head into the woods surrounding our campsite to find a long, straight stick suitable for carving into a point. Bear in mind that I was a lot younger back then. Harriet was older, and Amy only 1 year older than myself. We had been walking in deliberately the same direction as to not get lost, and memorizing the surroundings as we went in order to find our way back easily. About 15 minutes in, we couldn't find anything to take back, so we turned around to return to the campsite. That's the initial panic set it. The trees had almost unnaturally knitted themselves together in such a way that it seemed our path was non-existent in the first place, like it had just vanished. We looked around 360 degrees, and now everything looked exactly the same. Trees we could have sworn were different from one another appeared as all copies of the same tree. We kept walking in what we thought to be the correct direction, whilst shouting out for help, and eventually came to a concrete path, almost like a road, but very thin, separating the forest, splitting it into two. We didn't follow the road as it went in the wrong direction to our campsite. On the other side of the path was more forest. However, nearby was an abandoned shack, likely used for storage or whatever else. We had no idea anything like this was out here in these woods, so we just kept walking. We eventually came to a road we didn't recognize. A woman, wearing a pink and purple regatta outdoors coat, walked past, and we frantically asked her for the direction of our campsite, as by now, according to our watches and Harriet's phone, we'd been walking for an hour and a half. She said she'd never seen us before, but she said there's another campsite in that direction. We followed her advice and eventually came back to our campsite. We frantically apologized for being so long and that we couldn't find anything. The leader, Ian, could see all three of us were shaken up, and he stated confused that we'd only been gone 25 minutes and that our free time was still going on. To this day, this baffles all three of us, as our free time was 40 minutes long and our watches and phones had said we'd been gone for hours. The forest we were lost in felt crushing and claustrophobic, like we'd entered an area that the concept of time didn't apply to. I believe in the paranormal. However, this was so unlike anything I've heard or experienced before. It literally was like we'd been in a time vortex or something, and that hours in the forest were only minutes in the rest of the world. The feeling was very strange, and it stuck with me for the rest of the camp. So this story happened about 11 years ago. I was a senior in high school at the time, but it is the single most mind-boggling thing that I have ever experienced. It's also important to note that it happened in mid-December. I am from Iowa, and the winters here get cold at night. Like, if you get stuck outside, you will die kind of cold. That, plus the snowfall, makes everything dead silent. You can hear anything and everything inside the house, and even immediately outside of it. Well, me and my best friend were hanging out in my family's walkout basement, just having a boring winter night, playing video games. We were also the only ones home. The reason it was just us is because my mother went from work straight to a bar to grab a few drinks with coworkers. So me and my friend thought it would be a good idea to break into the family wine and live a little. As we were sitting there, opening up the first bottle, I hear the door to the garage open and slam shut. I immediately go, oh shit, and start looking for places to hide the bottle. My friend then says, I thought you said your mom was supposed to be out all night. She was, I replied. I then heard a few heavy stomps and hear my mother yell out, meows and boo! Anyone home? I yell back up the stairs. Yup, just hanging out in the basement. I hear a few more steps move from the garage door towards the stairs, and she yells out again, can you come help me with something? I need you up here. I reply back while frantically trying to find a good place to hide the wine bottle. Yup, give me just a minute. Then there was silence for about 20 seconds. "Anyone down there with you?" she yelled back in a more concerned, serious tone, in a voice that was slightly off of my mother's. This was the first thing that told me something wasn't right. Our family never cared if anyone was over, as our house was a very open house to all family and friends, and the voice, it was just wrong. Like it sounded like my mother's, but it was missing something that I couldn't out my finger on. Weirded out, I reply back, "Huh? Just Colton." After I yelled that back to her, I found a good place to hide the bottle and began walking up the steps to the next level. Now, as I was walking up the steps, I couldn't help but feel the overbearing silence of the house and the slight electric twinge that something isn't right. When I got to the top of the steps, I look over to where the door to garage is, and also the kitchen right next to it. And it's black, pitch black, all if the lights were off, and there was no moonlight shining through any windows. I walked over to the kitchen yelling out, "Mom, where are you?" There was no reply, just silence and darkness. I feel the electric twinge turn into full needles and my adrenaline kicking in full force. I have to get out of here as fast as possible. My mother was not home. I run back down the stairs, grabbing my coat along the way. "What's wrong?" Colton says. "My mom's not home," I reply as fast as I can, looking for my truck keys. "What do you mean? You were just talking with her?" I could see the confusion in his face. "There's no one home. We need to leave now." I took a few steps towards the back door that opens up to the yard, and then I see my dog shaking on the couch and my cat growling behind it. I couldn't leave them. I just knew that if we left, something would happen. "Are we leaving?" Colton said, still confused as all hell. "No, I can't leave them here alone. Something is really off. I'm going to call my mom and figure this out." I pull out my phone and call my mom. She picks up immediately. "Meows and Boo? What's going on?" She answers, "Mom, were you just home? I heard you yelling for me from the second level, and when I went up, you weren't there," I said frantically, hoping that she was playing a joke. "No, I'm just leaving the bar. I wasn't feeling very well. Are you okay? What do you mean you heard me?" I fill her in on the whole story, and she rushes home. Colton and I stayed in the basement with the animals until she got home. But before she did, you could hear something upstairs. Not walking or sitting on things, but a pressure in the air. Like a black hole was slowly moving from one room to the next. And the word that I would instinctively describe it as is hungry. When she got home, you could feel the thing leave just as quick as it came. Like an overbearing predatory presence had just flown away. We still have never figured out what the hell was going on. And this is just one story of many unexplainable things that have happened to us. But this is the easiest to write down, and one that I was happy to have a witness. My mother has passed away now, and I have moved away to Arizona. But whenever I go back to Iowa, and I see Colton, he still gets creeped out by what had happened. I will never truly know what happened. But I know that whatever it was that had my mother's voice, it was evil, and it was hungry. That's it for today's stories. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more.